Right then, morning everybody. Slightly less prepared than I usually am, as I've just been cleaning the house, and therefore that has not given me time to go shave or put on something a little bit more presentable today. But that's no excuse. Let's get into it. This video, this stream, is going to be all about how to use Ableton, which is probably the most basic of tutorials you will see out there on the web. I've been doing music production for 2 years now, and therefore my knowledge is not, I don't know everything. I don't think anybody can know everything unless you made Ableton or something like that, right? But this is going to be a quick kind of tutorial overview, very, very high level, about Ableton and what it does, how you use it, how I use it, what a plugin is, what sort of terminology is around it and stuff. But let's start with the first bit, which is why Ableton. So there are many different DAWs, digital audio workstations, on the market. So if you are getting into music production for the first time, go and look at other options that are out there. When I first started, there was only really Logic and Ableton as the main ones that I knew drum and bass producers were using. There's many others. There's FL Studio. Some people still use Cubase, things like that. Things you might not have heard, but you might have, in passing in a conversation or something. I use Ableton predominantly because it works on PC and Mac. So I'm here at home with my studio set up in front of me. But when I'm on the road, I want to be able to still make music, and therefore Ableton seemed like it was the best option there in order to be able to do that. All my files are stored on a thing called Dropbox, which I'm sure people have heard of. If not, it's absolutely brilliant. I'm not getting paid for this, but absolutely, I think Dropbox everyone should have. What Dropbox is essentially is all your files get backed up to the cloud, and as long as you are then basically subscribed to that folder on whatever machine that you want, or even on your phone, you will have access to all of your files. So I can easily switch from my Mac on my laptop, it's a MacBook, and access my files, and then press save, and then come over to my PC, and my saved file is now waiting for me to carry on. So yeah, Dropbox, absolutely brilliant. So therefore you can see that being able to work at home on a tune in Ableton, press save, head out the door with my bag, and get on a plane or something like that, and load up that same file that I was working on, carry on working on it, press save, and then when I land, check into the hotel, it's there ready for me waiting. So it's like a seamless workflow. Absolutely brilliant. And therefore that's why I chose Ableton. God, that was a long story. I told you, I've been cleaning this morning, so I am slightly tired from this. Okay, so let's jump into it then. So let's go into Ableton Live. Now, I'm still using Ableton Live 11. Ableton Live 12 is out currently, and I believe 13 will be out by the end of the year. But this is essentially what the interface is. I have a 4K screen. Okay, so what you're looking at on the stream will be 4K. For those people who don't have such big screens, though, I will I will zoom the display up slightly so you can probably read things a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's annoying. It's not 150. I'm going to have to type it in, aren't I? 150. There we go. Don't know about you, but sometimes, not superstitious, but sometimes I like things absolutely perfectly, don't you? Right then, so this is the default setup view that you get with Ableton. I believe this is called the session view, and it's what I originally learnt on because I thought that's what you do. So what you essentially do is these are all your different channels, and these are essentially little loops, little samples that you make, and you make them however you want. And then if you were to perform live, you'd be basically pressing those different samples to form a tune live. Brilliant! What a great way of doing it, of making music. That is not for me though. You know, I come from a classical background. I'm used to looking at sheet music, you know, with a treble clef and a bass clef, performing in orchestra, performing in swing band, performing, you know, live, but having, you know, pages and pages of sheet music to actually go through. And therefore, if you press tab on the keyboard, that's what this switches to. So this now switches to arrangement view, and this is what I make music in. I believe this is what most people make music in. It's a big assumption that, but I'm going to say most people probably use arrangement view instead. So let's go over kind of the fundamentals that we've got up here. So in the top left, oh, hang on, let me move me out of the way. Okay. In the top left-hand corner, this is your tempo. So this is your beats per minute. So for me, for drum and bass, that is 174. For people making house music, it varies, right? It can be anything between 122 and 128, I would say. Anything faster kind of goes into garage or trance or progressive house or something like that, but 120 to 130, I would say. And you set the BPM up in this top left-hand corner there. So I'll just set it to 174. And you won't really see much changing here. So, you know, when you're starting to make a new track, I set it to the general, you know, BPM of what I'm going to be working on. And then leave it alone. Don't touch it. So when you open Ableton, that's probably the first thing you want to actually change. You can actually change the time signature. Now, unless you're going to do some sort of weird 3/4 waltz style dance music, I don't think many people change that from 4/4. I'd be interested to know if there is somebody out there who actually is changing that. But yeah, 4/4 is going to be the time signature there, so you leave that alone. This is the metronome. So if I were to press play, hopefully you can hear that. Right, so that is the metronome beating out, you know, the actual the time intervals of your song. A metronome is obviously a kind of very old thing. It used to be a kind of a triangular shape. I'm just looking if I have one. No, it's like a triangular shaped kind of like box with a pendulum that swings left and right. I used to have one when I was playing keyboard and piano and stuff and organ, you know. But yeah, probably, you know, people out there don't really know what that is nowadays, I would say. But that will help you keep time. It's really good when you bring in a sample from somewhere and you're not quite sure what the tempo it should be. You can actually have that on in the background, bring your sample in, and then stretch your sample left and right, or faster or slower, to actually work out what the tempo is. So quite useful. But anyway, not you know, huge in the grand scheme of what Ableton can do. Right, next is the buttons that you just saw me pressing. So up at the top of the page here, you've got the play button, the stop button, and the record button. We'll get onto the record later on, or maybe in another video. Play essentially just moves the indicator along here where you are. You can actually just jump to specific places as well, just by clicking where you want to go. So just click anywhere in this kind of like top section here, and then stop when you're ready. And this basically tells you where you are. So this tells you that I'm at on grid 65.4.2, which is, if I was to zoom in, you would see is basically 65.4.2. I'm in that subdivision of time just there. You should know what this is. If you're a DJ, you should know these as your beat grid, essentially. So yeah, that should be self-explanatory. And obviously, if you just like click anywhere, it starts playing from there as you go through. So this is a great way to just scrub back and forward on your timeline. This button here is probably the only one that you would then use on the top here. So this is the loop button. So the loop button here allows me to set a loop, so I can say, I'd really like to play this bit of the song kind of, well, let's just move it a bit closer for purposes of this tutorial. I'd really like to play that bit of the song like repeatedly. This is really good when you are just trying to like find a good lead sound and or kick drum or something like that, and you just want to keep repeating it again and again and again and changing it on the left hand side. So you'll see here in a minute there it's going to loop, and it just keeps looping backwards and continually through that. If I turn it off, then you'll see it actually just carries on, as it were. There we go, and it carries on. Amazing. So you can move this around, you can stretch it about, whatever you want. I use it basically all the time. So as soon as you've set your BPM up here, and you've turned your metronome on if you really wanted to, you've got your play buttons here and your loop button, and that is it. Essentially, that is all you'll ever need to know in terms of moving around within the actual Ableton project itself. You can scrub back and forward here. Why is that not doing it? I guess I haven't really got anything to actually play currently. Oh yeah, I guess I can do it that way. You can scrub backwards and forwards here. There is a keyboard shortcut of Control Alt and then left and right with your mouse to actually do that. So that's really useful to actually be able to move left and right. Let me just let the dog out. Chewie, do you want to go out? Oh, who's a good boy? There we go. The dog is out. Yeah, that's about it. So let's have a look at the other bits of Ableton. So along the left hand side, now this has changed in Ableton Live 12. So if you are on 11, then great. If you are on 12, I'm sure you're probably scrabbling around trying to find the equivalent sections within Ableton. But basically, you've got the pre-installed stuff. Actually, this only comes with Ableton Live Studio, I believe, which is the more expensive version. But you get basically a bunch of free sounds and samples and things like that. So yeah, like these are basically all the things that you've got to kind of like play with initially before you've bought any plugins or sample packs or splice or any of the other kind of like things that you can use to make sounds within Ableton. And you will spend money on that stuff. If you've got anybody that you know who makes music and they've got lots of little pieces of hardware, or if you know a guitarist in your life and they've bought loads of pedals, this is your equivalent now of you buying lots and lots of samples from various places like Culture Samples and Avant and Splice, like I was saying, and going onto people's Patreons. Real artists are putting out their samples and their Serum presets and blah, blah, blah. Things that you might not know the words of right now, but you will because you'll be spending a lot of time on that stuff and you'll really enjoy it. But by default, the things that it brings with you are orchestral sounds, I would say. Let me close the door. The dog is happy and rolling around in the garden. And yeah, so they're quite orchestral sounds. Now, for me, that was great because, as I said, I've got a classical background. I played in the Royal Northern College of Music. I was invited to join the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra. So when I first joined, I was like, oh, this is amazing, fantastic. I've got strings and violas and brass and trombones and timpani and flutes, like fantastic. This is my world, but you know, kind of digital versions of them. You've then got various drums and things like that, instruments as well, audio effects. We will get into this, but these are basically things that you can do to change the sound of the pre-existing samples and instruments and stuff like that. Max for Live, no idea what that is. Plugins, we can get into plugins in a later video. In fact, I already have a video on this. If you go back to my YouTube channel and check for my favorite plugins or something like, or it probably had a really clickbaity title like "These plugins will save your life" or something like that. Like, yeah, go check on that. That covers plugins actually, so it'll be a good follow-up one for you. Samples, clips, grooves. We won't go into that just now. But basically, all you need to know is essentially the sounds and instruments is essentially what you're going to be able to use straight out of the bat to make music, essentially. Below this are your places. So these are things that I've brought in that don't come with Ableton that I use like all the time. So for example, I've got my Serum instruments. I've got my packs of stuff that came with it. I've got my samples that I've brought in from other places. Let me move myself out of the way there. And you can see I've got tons. You know, I've got a small amount compared to some other people, but these are places that I've been to or artists that I've followed, and they've given me their samples, given me their MIDI files or Serum presets or whatever it may be. And they're like, yeah, really, really, really useful. And this is what is in my current project right now. So essentially, you know, when you want to start making music, you've got two choices. I've kept saying the two words, haven't I? Samples and presets. Those are essentially your two ways of making music within Ableton. And you'll see that, you know, Ableton is already kind of, by default, it's given you two MIDI channels, and it's given you two audio channels, which are basically for presets and for samples. So in fact, let me color code these slightly better for you. So let's say that all preset stuff is going to be green and all sample stuff is going to be red. There we go. So we've now got essentially two MIDI ways of making music, and we've got two sample ways of making music. Okay, let me change my tempo to 174 because, yeah, as I said, all my samples are actually around 174, so I don't want this to sound awful when I do a little tutorial for you. So let's start making music, right? So, you know, for me, for the purposes of this tutorial here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in essentially some drums, and then I'm going to write a bass line. Okay, and that will be enough for this tutorial to basically go over the two different ways of actually making music here. So first of all, I will just bring in some drums. This is not the way I would personally do this, but you know, for the purposes of bringing in a sample for this, it is going to be the easiest way of showing you. So I'm going to go into this folder here, and I have some drum sections already here. When you actually click on each of these, you'll hear it playing. So that's down here. You'll hear this playing. If you don't want to hear it playing, just turn the headphone icon off. And you can see you can pre-listen to it before you actually bring it in. Okay, so you're going to bring in a drum sample here. I'm just going to plop it there, and then I'm going to add another. What did I do then? I should have put it on the red one, shouldn't I? Sorry, I'm trying to do this properly. Put it onto the audio sample there. I'm going to put my percussion onto there. And I need two more. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say insert an audio channel. And then insert another audio channel. And basically bring in, I should bring in my ride and bring in my snare. And I'm going to color those. I'm going to put these into a little group. So I'm going to select all of those by pressing Shift and selecting those. And then right clicking and then going group tracks. And then rename this track here to drums, and then I can set it to red, and then I can assign the color red to all of my samples. There we go. So now I've got some drums. Boom, starting to make music. Brilliant. So the sample is only, you know, this long, and my track is obviously going to be quite long. So I'm going to move these to the beginning of the grid there. And if I move my mouse to the end here, let me move myself out of the way. There we go. You can see I get a little handle there, and I can drag it and stretch it however long I want. Or I can copy, I can click, and then I can paste. Or if I wanted to make a really long one, I can actually press Control D for duplicate and just keep tapping that, and it will all of a sudden make loads and loads of them. Now in this particular case, there really wasn't much point in me making different versions of it, so I may as well just drag one long one over there. this is one of the things, this is one of those cleanliness things, this is one of those ways that, you know, working in Ableton, you have to be pretty tidy and have a little bit of self, what do you call it, self-motivation to actually keep things tidy, and because this is going to get very, very complicated the more channels that we add over time. Okay, so I've got a kind of like endless stream of drums. If I turn on my metronome, you'll hear it perfectly in time there. Wow, wow, how amazing. Right, let's move into MIDI then. So let's move into creating, you know, writing notes. So we just double click on an empty section here, and it will bring up this bit down here. So you'll see that, you know, without it, there's nothing down here. It says no clip selected. And if I double click there, it's made this thing down here. Okay, now this is a MIDI clip. Okay, so I'm going to make it quite long here. And essentially down here is essentially where I can start writing notes. So I can just tap, double click like that, and start making notes. And you'll hear that that is awful. In fact, actually, hang on, you can't hear it because I haven't put an instrument on it actually. So I'm going to choose a instrument. Let's choose a let's choose something that's not going to sound awful. So not a broken piano, which I've actually got favorited because I think it's quite cool. Let's choose a piano. Okay, drag it onto. Oh, hang on, I've done the wrong thing, haven't I? I've put a sound on there instead of an instrument. Whoopsie. This is where it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. So let's just search for a piano. There we go. And right, sounds awful, right? Well, that's because it is, one, firstly, it's a load of old rubbish, what I actually wrote, but secondly, because it's not in time or anything, and it's repeating kind of like endlessly here. It's only repeating this section here, and then it's doing it again, and then it's doing it again, and it's doing it again. So we're going to change that. So you'll see that the thing that I clicked on, the MIDI clip down here in the actual panel down here, has gone. And you're like, where's it gone? Well, what it's doing is it's showing me currently the instrument rack that I've got, which is the piano that I've just dragged on here. If you look down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's actually two tabs. Yeah, so you can press those tabs back and forth, and it will go between the actual instrument and the MIDI rack. If you've got two screens, you can actually have both of these open at the same time, which is really cool. So you can always have like your MIDI rack down the bottom, so your instrument rack down the bottom, and then your MIDI like over on another screen over here or something like that, which is really, really cool. So you'll see what I've written here is, you know, rubbish. It's not even like in time, okay? Like, because I just randomly put that kind of like stuff there. If you don't want, if you don't like it where it is, just move it. So just click, move it. Let's get them all like on the actual on the grid, like that. That will start to sound slightly better. Right, okay, so that is starting to work, but I actually want it to be longer. So what you'll see here is it's set the length to just 2 here. So what I usually do is set it to 8. Okay, so now I've got more MIDI to actually play with here, and then I can actually start, you know, writing my MIDI. So all I'm doing here is just copy and paste, or you can duplicate just like we did before, or I can just hold down Control and I can just like grab more notes and add them like that instead. Or up in the top right hand corner, you can actually press the little kind of pen icon, and you can actually kind of like draw like this. Now that's rubbish, that will sound awful. Do that, but you can do it that way if you want. Equally, you can also press the keyboard buttons as well. So if you press the keys button, the keys button there, I believe your A S, D, F, G, H, J, K, L buttons have now turned into the white keys on the keyboard, and the Q, W, P buttons have now turned into the sharps and flats, the black keys on your keyboard. I've never used that because I have a keyboard actually here. So, but that is one thing you can actually do. So now if we listen. That note, so I'm going to move it there. Don't like that, so I'm going to move it there. Move it like that. Just keep like this is how you now start to like write music. So let's listen to. Oops, let's listen to that. You know, this is all going to be awful. Okay, I can make notes longer by just stretching them. So I can have two notes which are longer there, two notes which are longer there. It's a piano, so let's just make one really long and delete these. Okay, you get the idea, right? This is simple. If you don't like the actual, you know, instrument that you're using, just scroll for a different one. Let's try this one instead. Creepy. And this is what I mean. Like, you now want to start like. Go down here and start changing the actual This is how you start making music. You don't need to do anything else. As long as you can write MIDI, and as long as you can bring in samples. So let's say we want to bring in another sample. So we're going to say right click, insert audio track there. And then we're going to go searching for some lovely atmospheric pad kind of like stuff. Atmosphere. That'll do. Let's just search for some sort of loop. Something better than that. Some of these are quite good. For the purposes of this video not going on forever and ever, let's just choose some ambient things here. There we go, bring that in, drag it in there, and then it's that simple. MIDI is super easy to understand. I think, you know, this is literally just sheet music. These are your keys down here that you can press on. Yeah, that should be really, really simple. If you want to make a new MIDI clip, then you just click another one and start repeating the process. If you want to add another instrument that's happening at the same time, you just click there and do exactly the same thing there. Okay, now choose an instrument for that. So let's choose a trumpet. There we go, trumpet. And let's choose let's see what this sound. Oh, that's a sound file. Trumpet. There we go. You can barely hear that. Okay. Now you'll see if I can't hear anything, well, firstly I'm pressing these buttons over here. The S stands for solo. So when you want to listen to only one particular instrument, we call that soloing. I guess that comes from when you do a solo in music. You know, when I was a trumpeter, a solo for me would be I would stand up and like play my little section of fanfare or something like that, and then sit back down again. So I guess it comes from that. But yeah, that's why you use solo. the actual track there, so you can just listen to one particular track itself. So I can just listen to the kick, for example, or I can listen to the snare, or I can listen to my rubbish trumpet. And now if you want to increase the volume level, you'll see I did it here for just purposes of being easy. So this little section here, I do not recommend changing your volume level there. We will probably get into that in a later video, but the way of really doing increasing your audio, the sound, your gain as it's called in music production terms, is you probably want to put a we did say we might go into this, didn't we? A audio effect on here, utility, and this a utility basically, and that basically puts this thing down here, and here you can control the volume level. So this is going to be really, really loud. Okay, and of course there are ways that the trumpet can sound slightly better or worse that you can actually change here. You can change all the kind of like settings here and stuff. The endless possibilities are in front of you, right? This is going to, I said this was going to be a very, very high level overview, but hopefully you can see that the number of buttons here, you know, when you open Ableton, you go, oh my god, like what is all of this, you know, all these different tabs that you didn't know were even there, you know, all these different ways of looking at the interface. Probably horrified initially of like, you know, how many buttons there are and why things are certain lit up and other things aren't, etc, etc. But really it's super simple, you know, set your tempo, play and stop buttons, loop button there, and then just, you know, these are just your tracks for both audio and MIDI. You drag your samples in from over here. You drag your instruments in from over here. You drag them onto there. You keep pressing play and stop, and then you keep moving your MIDI around, and eventually you get to a hit song. If it was only that simple, right? So let me show you a finished song. So let me show you this one, I think. Let's not save that because that was awful. And I'll show you what a finished song looks like, just for comparison. So this should take, there we go, done. So let's go through it. So this is the entire song. Okay, so you'll see I've just got many tracks. Okay, I have another video which is called my Ableton template, which shows you the way that I organize things. But essentially I've got a group. We just did a group, didn't we? This is a group of vocal samples. So if I was to solo this, you'd hear, always trying to go slow. Okay, so that's my vocal sample group. I've then got my drums, so many different drums. So again, if I solo those, you'll hear the drums. Okay, I've then got my sub, which is basically my, you know, underlying bass line. You might not even be able to hear that depending on what speakers you actually got at home. My bass, which is kind of a duplicate of my sub but at a higher frequency, so people who don't have subwoofers, or if you're listening on laptop or on some awful car stereo or AirPods, actually AirPods are not great for sub bass frequencies. You can hear that here, you can hear it on those at least. Okay, I've got my what I call my through bass, which is the bass stuff that I want to be heard throughout the song on all frequencies, regardless of anything else that I'm doing in the song. Okay. And I've got my mid stuff here. You get the idea, right? I've got my mid stuff, I've got my tops, and I've got my swooshy, panny, you know, atmospheric like stuff, all of it here. Hopefully you can see that I'm really only using samples, you know, these waveform looking things here. Okay, and I'm using MIDI, these dot looking things here. Okay, so you can see here, this is my MIDI panel here for my some FX that I'm doing. What is this one actually? I think this is just a big, like a droning sound. But you might not even be able to hear that, it's so subtle. You hear it in the mix, obviously. And then I've got my top stuff here, which is again like different. Here we go to the next one. There we go. So you'll see that's all I'm doing. Like everything I've just shown you in about 20 minutes. That's the fundamentals of how, you know, to make music here. So, you know, this is all beautiful, lovely stuff. And essentially when you put it all together, then you do get a song, right?
Change my name. If you never know, always trying to go slow. Never take it on the road, yeah. Know me. If you never know, sticking to the same zone. Better do what you're told, yeah. Know me. Wasn't always.
There you go. There's so much more to learn. But hopefully this has inspired you and hopefully taken some of the scary stuff out of learning and opening Ableton for the first time. It really is just samples and MIDI, right? That's all this is. You know, I'll open another song to kind of just prove that, right? To get starting to making music, all you need is to be able to bring in some samples that you like, some drums, some atmospherics, a sample from an old song that you really, really like, whatever it may be, okay? And then to be able to write MIDI, write music, write notes, okay? Here's another song. This is exactly the same, right? So this is like a bunch of MIDI that I've written. Quite a lot of MIDI. In fact, all MIDI, I think, in this particular one. And then back to my drums. There again. I've just preferred... The reason I don't write MIDI drums is because when you record drums and create a sample from it, there's so many good, talented, professional people out there recording these and mastering them absolutely perfectly. You'd be silly not to use sampled drums, I would personally say, because they add so much life to your mix. It's the driving force, it's the beat behind your music. And especially for drums and bass, drum and bass, you know, that I make, you know, that is really important to just have a really awesome kick, you know, from a real sampled live instrument and a really kick-ass snare as well, again, from a real snare that a real person, you know, recorded, and then mess around with that digitally to actually bring back some of the human element, like, you know, timing wise and things like that into it, and velocity, which is, you know, how hard you're hitting the actual notes and stuff. So yeah, you know, this is another song. So this is listen to this one. Oh, I've forgotten to. I must have something soloed a moment. Right, let me turn that off. Try again. I'm not yours. Same again. So this is just MIDI and samples. Everything else that you're seeing down here, so all of these things, like these EQ8s and all that kind of stuff, all this, where you kind of go, oh God, what's all that? Andy, you've pulled the wool over our eyes. What the heck is all of this stuff? Go and have a look at my Ableton plugins that I use video, and that will go over kind of what all of these kind of are. So you've probably heard the word compressor, you've probably heard the word delay, you've probably heard the word EQ, as well as serum, which I actually mentioned earlier. Go check that video out because that goes into way more detail than you need to know in this particular one. But hopefully that has been useful. Certainly if you are starting a new adventure in music production, then yes, Ableton will look a little scary at first, but hopefully just rewind this video and hopefully the buttons that you need to get started and get going have all been described. And if you liked it, then thumbs up the video and I'll do another one where we go into more detail, or we'll go live again and people can ask me in the questions and in the chat about what to do, or maybe things to concentrate on a little bit more in future. So there you go. That is Ableton. Hopefully it was useful, and yeah, if it has, then please subscribe to my channel, because the more subscribers I have, the better it looks. No, the more subscribers I get, you know, the more it kind of gives incentive that what I'm doing here is being seen and useful, and it's really good for kind of self-motivation and stuff. So yeah, that'd be really good. Otherwise, I will see you online, on socials, on the Pete Tong DJ Academy and stuff like that. But for now, that is it. Goodbye.